The human chose a fragile alien princess. As his prize now, she leads armies across the galaxy. The galaxy had always been full of wonders, strange worlds, and races of beings no human could have imagined. Among these, humans were often considered clever but fragile, never truly powerful compared to the vast alien civilizations that ruled the stars. Yet, in one corner of this endless expanse, a human named Kale had made a name for himself. He was not the strongest in physical combat, nor the most technologically advanced, but his mind was sharp and his instincts unmatched. Rumors followed him wherever he went, tales of daring choices and impossible victories. Many called him reckless, but others saw a method in his madness, a brilliance hidden beneath the casual smile he wore. The story began on a planet called Vierlia, known across the galaxy for its beauty and danger. Its skies shimmered with colors no human eye had ever seen, and its oceans glowed faintly at night, reflecting the twin moons above. Vierlia was also a neutral ground, a place where leaders from every corner of the stars came to negotiate, compete, and show off their strengths. This particular season, a grand contest had been announced, one that drew warriors and strategists from dozens of planets. The prize was unusual, a choice among several distinguished figures, each representing their own kingdom or species. The winner would select a prize to accompany them back to their home or fleet, someone who could be an ally, a diplomat, or even a symbol of prestige. Kale walked through the crowded arena with quiet confidence. The crowd buzzed with excitement and whispers, speculating about the strange human who seemed to stand apart from everyone else. Some laughed, claiming he had no chance. Others watched carefully, sensing the kind of unpredictability that only humans could bring. The competitors were all impressive. Tall, armored aliens with weapons that hummed with energy, beings that could shift shapes, and creatures whose very presence seemed to bend the air around them. Yet Kale walked calmly, observing them all, noting not just strength, but patterns, strategy, and subtle weaknesses. When it came time for the final challenge, the competitors had to choose carefully. This was not just about physical prowess. It was about insight, vision, and the ability to see beyond the obvious. Kale had watched quietly, smiling when others made flashy moves or tried to intimidate one another. Then the moment came to choose his prize. The crowd expected him to pick one of the strong, confident, or dangerous contestants, the ones who could fight, negotiate, or inspire fear. But Kale surprised everyone. His eyes settled on a young alien woman, delicate in appearance, almost fragile. She had long, silver hair that shimmered like starlight, and her eyes reflected the wisdom of ages. Her skin seemed soft, almost luminescent, and she wore a simple robe that marked her not as a warrior, but as a princess. She did not carry weapons, and she made no attempt to appear intimidating. To the spectators, she seemed an unlikely choice, almost foolish. Whispers spread like wildfire across the arena. Why would he choose her? She is so fragile. He must be joking. Does he not see how weak she is? But Kale only smiled and stepped forward. He spoke gently to the princess, introducing himself and explaining that she would accompany him. The princess blinked in surprise. She had been raised in isolation, trained in diplomacy, science, and strategy, not in combat or contests. No one expected her to leave her palace or her world. And yet, there was something in Kale's gaze that reassured her, a quiet strength and confidence that made her heart beat not with fear, but with curiosity. As they left the arena together, the crowd erupted in mixed reactions. Some cheered for the bold human who dared to make such an unexpected choice, while others shook their heads, convinced he had made a mistake. Kale did not notice the chatter. He focused only on the princess, observing how she held herself, how her mind seemed alert and sharp despite the fragile exterior. He knew there was more to her than anyone could see, and he was eager to discover it. The journey from Vierlia to Kale's home planet was long, spanning several days through star systems unfamiliar to both of them. During the trip, the princess learned about humans in ways she had never imagined. She had always thought them fragile and chaotic, but she discovered their resourcefulness, humor, and surprising bravery. Kale shared stories of past adventures, battles narrowly avoided, and clever strategies that had turned impossible situations into victories. He never boasted, yet the lessons were clear. Strength came not just from power, but from intelligence, intuition, and courage. At first, the princess remained cautious. She had been trained to observe, to plan, and to avoid unnecessary risks. She studied Kale quietly, analyzing his habits, his decisions, and the way he treated others. She noticed that he never underestimated anyone, even those who appeared weak or insignificant. Slowly, she began to relax, realizing that her choice to leave her home and trust him might be the beginning of something remarkable. Kale, too, observed her closely. While she appeared delicate, he noticed her sharp eyes, the way she thought several steps ahead, and the subtle confidence in her voice when she spoke of ideas or solutions. He realized that her fragility was only skin deep. Inside, she had a mind capable of understanding complex systems and a heart brave enough to face challenges he had only begun to imagine. What others saw as weakness, Kale saw as hidden strength, the kind that could grow into something extraordinary. As days turned into nights aboard the starship, they began to share stories about their worlds. The princess spoke of her palace, her family, and the intricate political webs that governed her people. Kale shared tales of exploration, diplomacy, and the strange friendships he had formed across different galaxies. They discovered common ground in curiosity and intelligence, a shared desire to understand the universe beyond simple power struggles. The princess began to feel a sense of freedom she had never known. For the first time, she could choose her path, guided not by tradition, but by her own mind and heart. The galaxy outside the ship's windows was breathtaking. Nebulas glowed in colors beyond description, and distant planets rotated silently, each holding stories unknown to them. The princess would often stand by the observation deck, gazing at the stars, feeling both small and infinite. Kale joined her sometimes, and in those moments words were unnecessary. They understood that the universe was vast and full of possibilities, and that their journey together had only just begun. By the time they arrived at Kale's home planet, the princess had begun to transform quietly. She was no longer just a fragile figure. She carried herself with a sense of purpose, curiosity, and quiet determination. People who met her were struck by her calm intelligence and the way she seemed to observe everything with precision. Even those who had doubted her strength began to see that her presence was something special. Kale introduced her to his world, showing her the blend of human ingenuity and resilience that defined his people. Together, they explored cities that hovered above oceans, machines that could think and adapt, and communities that thrived despite challenges that would have crushed others. The princess learned quickly, absorbing knowledge like a sponge, and she began to see that her fragile appearance was no barrier to greatness. By the end of the first part of their story, the stage was set. A human had chosen a fragile alien princess as his prize, surprising everyone. She had left her home, her comfort, and the expectations of her people behind, stepping into a universe full of uncertainty and opportunity. The journey ahead promised challenges, discoveries, and growth beyond anything either of them had imagined. And quietly, in both of their hearts, a partnership was forming, one that would change not just their lives, but perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself. The arena of whispers and doubts had faded, replaced by the quiet anticipation of adventure. The princess had stepped beyond fragility, and Kale had chosen not just a companion, but a mind and spirit that could stand alongside him in the vast, unpredictable universe. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next, knowing that sometimes the most fragile-seeming choices could lead to the strongest destinies. The journey through the stars continued, and the fragile princess began to realize that the universe was far larger and more complex than she had ever imagined. On her home planet, life had been carefully arranged, every step of her existence guided by tradition, ceremony, and the expectations of her family. She had spent years learning diplomacy, science, and strategy, but it had all been within the walls of her palace, under the careful eyes of her teachers and advisors. The real galaxy beyond those walls, with its countless worlds, races, and cultures, was something entirely different. Kale became her guide in this new universe. He was patient, never rushing her, and always explaining the strange customs, advanced technologies, and intricate politics of the galaxies they passed through. He introduced her to alien species who spoke in musical tones, creatures whose bodies shifted with emotion, and beings whose ideas of communication were completely foreign to her. At first, the princess was overwhelmed. She had never imagined that a universe so vast could hold so many possibilities, dangers, and wonders all at once. Yet she also felt a thrill of excitement, a spark that had been buried under years of careful instruction and isolation. During their travels, she observed Kale closely. He moved with ease among different species, negotiating disputes with words, gestures, and a quiet authority that demanded respect without force. She realized that strength in the galaxy came in many forms, not just physical power or technological might, but intelligence, observation, and understanding. Slowly, she began to absorb these lessons, noticing patterns in behavior, strategies in conversation, and methods of solving problems without violence. Kale noticed her attentiveness and smiled quietly. He knew that her apparent fragility masked a mind capable of remarkable insight. One day, they visited a world called Lyriona, a planet of vast forests and glowing rivers, home to creatures who lived in harmony with their environment in ways the princess had never seen. Kale had business to attend to, negotiations with local leaders who were wary of outsiders, and he asked the princess to accompany him. She hesitated at first, unsure if her presence would be helpful, but Kale encouraged her to observe and speak when she had insight. As the discussions began, it became clear that the local leaders were resistant to Kale's ideas. They had long-held traditions and were suspicious of strangers who claimed to understand their world. The princess listened carefully, noting their concerns and fears. When the debate grew tense, she spoke softly, offering perspectives that no one had considered. She suggested compromises that respected local traditions while still achieving Kale's goals. Slowly, the room shifted from tension to curiosity, then to agreement. Kale watched quietly, impressed. She had a way of seeing the truth behind words and actions, understanding motivations and intentions that were invisible to others. What the world had assumed was weakness, the softness of her voice, the delicacy of her frame, was actually a strength. Her intelligence, patience, and empathy allowed her to navigate situations that brute force or authority could never solve. Kale realized that he had chosen wisely. She was more than a companion or a prize. She was a partner, a mind equal to his own. The princess began to understand herself in new ways. For the first time, she realized that fragility was not a limitation. Her body might be delicate, but her mind was strong, capable of analyzing situations, predicting outcomes, and inspiring cooperation. She experimented with small decisions, offering advice on navigation, communication, and strategy. Each success built her confidence, and with every challenge, she felt more capable of shaping her own destiny rather than merely following the expectations of others. As they traveled to different planets, she encountered challenges that tested her intellect. On a desert world called Iridian, she helped Kale negotiate access to water supplies, devising a plan that balanced the needs of the local population with the requirements of his mission. On a city world of towering spires called Kalora, she mediated a conflict between rival merchant families, finding a solution that preserved honor while preventing bloodshed. Each experience taught her that her perceived fragility was irrelevant. Her mind and courage were what truly mattered. Kale often marveled at the way she adapted. She was quick to learn, careful to observe, and thoughtful in every decision. Unlike many who relied on sheer power, she considered consequences, anticipated reactions, and understood the subtle nuances of diplomacy. He began to rely on her advice more frequently, consulting her on matters of strategy and negotiation. Slowly, those around them began to notice too. Crew members, allies, and even strangers were impressed by the princess who could solve problems that had baffled experienced leaders for years. Despite her growing confidence, the princess also faced moments of doubt. There were times when the galaxy seemed too vast, too complex, and the stakes too high. She missed the safety of her palace, the predictable routines, and the security of her old life. But Kale never let her falter. He reminded her that every great leader had faced fear. That strength came from facing uncertainty with courage and wisdom. He encouraged her to trust herself, to believe that her intellect and empathy could be more powerful than weapons or armies. Gradually, she began to see the universe not as a place of danger, but as a realm of opportunity. Every challenge was a lesson, every encounter a chance to grow. She started keeping notes, studying the customs of different worlds, the strengths and weaknesses of various species, and the political patterns that guided decisions across the galaxy. She realized that her mind could weave together disparate pieces of information into strategies that no one else could see. Her growth did not go unnoticed. During one meeting with a council of interstellar leaders, she suggested an alliance that would benefit multiple worlds while preventing conflict. At first, some leaders were skeptical, seeing her as a fragile outsider with little authority. But her reasoning was precise, her arguments clear and compelling. Slowly, they began to listen. By the end of the session, the council had agreed to consider her proposal seriously. Kale watched from the side, proud and amazed. The princess who had once seemed fragile had begun to command respect not through force, but through intellect, vision, and empathy. Beyond politics, the princess also discovered the importance of understanding people. She learned that leadership was not just about making decisions, but about inspiring trust and loyalty. She observed Kale's interactions with his crew and allies, noting how he listened, encouraged, and guided without dominating. She began practicing the same approach, offering guidance and support, and slowly, people began to seek her advice. They trusted her judgment and respected her insight, even though she was young and had no prior experience leading armies or governments. One night, as they traveled through a quiet region of space filled with drifting asteroid fields and distant nebulae, the princess spoke to Kale about her fears and hopes. She admitted that she had always thought of herself as fragile, limited by her upbringing and appearance. Kale listened and gently reminded her that strength came in many forms. He told her that he had chosen her not for her physical abilities, but because he had seen the potential in her mind and heart. That moment solidified her confidence. She realized that she had the power to shape her destiny, to become more than anyone had ever expected. As days passed, she began taking initiative. She suggested improvements to the ship's operations, offering ideas that increased efficiency and safety. She proposed diplomatic approaches that avoided confrontation, and she even devised training exercises that prepared the crew for potential challenges. Slowly, she transformed from a passive companion into an active partner, a mind equal to Kale's in thought and strategy. By the time they approached the outskirts of a galaxy known for political turmoil and constant skirmishes, the princess had become someone entirely new. She was no longer the fragile figure who had timidly followed Kale from Violia. She was alert, confident, and ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. Kale knew that the galaxy would soon see the power of her mind, the courage of her spirit, and the brilliance that had been hidden behind her delicate exterior. The princess reflected on how far she had come. She had left behind the safe routines of her home, faced the unknown, and learned to trust herself and her abilities. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but she no longer felt fear or hesitation. Instead, she felt curiosity, determination, and a growing sense of purpose. She realized that her fragility had been only a surface trait, a mask that hid her true potential. Now, that potential was beginning to shine, ready to influence the course of events far beyond her expectations. As they prepared to enter the turbulent sectors of the galaxy, the princess and Kale stood side by side on the observation deck of their ship, gazing at the endless stars. She felt a mixture of excitement and resolve. The adventures ahead would challenge her mind, test her courage, and push her to grow even further. But she was ready. The fragile princess had begun to awaken, discovering strength in intellect, empathy, and vision. And quietly, in the vastness of space, a transformation had begun, one that would change the destiny of both herself and the galaxy around her. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, full of wonders and dangers that no one could anticipate. For the princess, the journey had already taught her much, but the real test was about to begin. Her intelligence, insight, and courage had been growing steadily, and now it was time to see how these qualities could influence real events. Kale knew that her potential went far beyond observation and diplomacy. She had the ability to shape outcomes in ways that could change entire worlds. Their first mission together in this new phase took them to a planet called Ruvira, known for its harsh landscapes and a history of constant skirmishes among its people. Kale had been asked to assist in mediating conflicts there, and he brought the princess along, not only as a companion but as an active participant. The planet's leaders were skeptical of outsiders, and even more doubtful when they saw her. They whispered among themselves about the fragile human-chosen princess who seemed out of place. Some laughed quietly, others shook their heads, expecting her to be of no help. The princess, however, was calm. She had learned to observe carefully, to understand the fears, motivations, and desires of those around her. She listened to each faction, asking questions and encouraging leaders to speak honestly about their grievances. Slowly, she began to notice patterns in the conflicts, small misunderstandings, long-held grudges, and hidden opportunities for compromise. She shared her insights with Kale in private, suggesting solutions that avoided confrontation and provided benefits to all parties. Kale acted on her advice, and to the amazement of everyone, the first meetings ended with tentative agreements. Leaders who had been ready to fight now shook hands and promised cooperation. The princess's ability to see connections that others overlooked impressed not only Kale, but also the planet's inhabitants. They began to understand that her perceived fragility was misleading. She had the mind of a strategist and the heart of a true mediator, able to inspire trust and respect through calm intelligence rather than force. As days passed on Ruvira, her role expanded. She organized discussions between different villages, created programs for education and resource sharing, and even suggested ways to improve trade routes between the planet's regions. Every initiative she introduced helped stabilize the situation, and slowly, people began to admire her. Children followed her around curiously, elders sought her advice, and even the most stubborn leaders started to acknowledge her wisdom. The fragile princess had begun to command respect, not through physical power, but through insight, empathy, and problem-solving. Meanwhile, Kale observed quietly, amazed at her growth. He had known she was intelligent, but the extent of her abilities exceeded even his expectations. She had taken her first lessons in diplomacy and turned them into real, practical solutions. He saw the spark of leadership in her eyes, the quiet confidence that had replaced hesitation and doubt. Kale realized that the princess was no longer just a companion. She was becoming a figure who could influence entire worlds, and perhaps even the course of galactic events. But the journey was not without challenges. During one of their negotiations, a group of visiting merchants tried to manipulate the princess, hoping to take advantage of her youth and supposed fragility. They presented false data, claiming resources were scarce and that certain factions would refuse cooperation. The princess listened carefully, analyzing every statement and questioning inconsistencies. She noticed subtle contradictions in their story, realized the deception, and calmly corrected the misinformation. The merchants were caught off guard, unable to defend their false claims. The princess had demonstrated not only intelligence, but courage, handling a potentially tense situation without conflict. Her success on Ruvira earned her wider recognition. Word spread across nearby star systems about the young princess who could resolve disputes that had lasted for decades. Aliens and humans alike began to approach her for guidance, advice, and collaboration. She became a symbol of hope, showing that brains and empathy could achieve what armies sometimes could not. Despite this growing reputation, the princess remained humble, focusing on learning, observing, and improving herself. She understood that her journey had only begun, and the galaxy still held countless challenges she needed to face. One evening, as she and Kale traveled through the vast darkness of space, she reflected on the transformations in her life. She remembered the days when she had been confined to her palace, taught to be careful, delicate, and obedient. Now, she had a voice that could influence decisions, a mind capable of strategy, and the confidence to step forward even when others doubted her. She realized that her fragility had never been a weakness. It had been a mask that hid the true strength of her intellect and spirit. Their next journey took them to a neighboring system known for its political unrest. Several planets were on the brink of conflict, and Kale was called upon to assist in negotiation and coordination. The princess prepared diligently, studying maps, communication logs, and historical conflicts. She worked late into the nights, analyzing the motivations of each leader and predicting potential outcomes. Her efforts were meticulous, and Kale often remarked on how impressive her dedication and insight were. When they arrived, the princess took a more active role. She met with local leaders, not just observing but engaging in discussions, asking probing questions, and presenting well-thought-out proposals. Her suggestions balanced fairness and strategy, offering solutions that could benefit everyone while reducing the likelihood of war. Some leaders were initially skeptical, unable to believe that someone so young and fragile-looking could provide such valuable advice. But as they listened, they realized that her words were not empty. They were based on careful thought, experience, and insight. Slowly, she gained their trust. One particular challenge tested her skills more than any before. Two planets had been at odds for generations, each blaming the other for past grievances and unwilling to compromise. The princess spent hours listening to their histories, understanding their perspectives, and identifying areas where cooperation was possible. She suggested a joint project that would benefit both worlds, a shared research facility to develop clean energy, creating jobs and fostering collaboration. The leaders were hesitant at first, but her calm, logical approach, combined with Kale's support, gradually convinced them. By the end of the negotiations, agreements were signed, and for the first time in decades, there was hope for lasting cooperation. The princess's successes continued to grow. Kale began to rely on her not only for advice, but also for planning missions, coordinating teams, and even guiding diplomatic efforts on his behalf. Her presence became invaluable, and slowly, those who had doubted her abilities began to admire her. Crew members of Kale's ship sought her counsel, and other leaders in the galaxy began sending messages of respect and collaboration. The fragile princess had become a force of intellect and empathy, earning influence through skill, vision, and wisdom. Through all of this, the princess never lost her humility. She understood that intelligence and strategy were only tools, not guarantees of success. She valued teamwork, listened carefully to others, and learned from mistakes. Her ability to combine knowledge with understanding made her stand out. Kale noticed this as well and often remarked that her strength was not in winning battles, but in preventing them, in inspiring cooperation and trust where conflict might have been expected. One quiet night, as the ship passed through a nebula glowing with shades of purple and gold, the princess and Kale stood together, looking out at the stars. The princess spoke softly, reflecting on her growth and the journey ahead. She realized that the galaxy was not just a place of conflict or competition. It was a place of possibility, where intelligence, empathy, and courage could shape outcomes more profoundly than any weapon or army. Kale smiled, knowing that she had begun to understand the full extent of her abilities. As they approached the next system, the princess felt a sense of readiness she had never known before. She had moved from being a fragile, protected figure to someone capable of influencing events, guiding people, and inspiring trust. The challenges ahead would be greater, involving not only diplomacy but also strategic decisions that could impact entire planets. Yet she no longer felt fear or hesitation. She had discovered that her mind, insight, and courage were stronger than anyone could have imagined. The galaxy was vast, and her journey was far from over. But the princess had grown in confidence, skill, and determination. She had learned to trust herself, to act decisively, and to inspire others without force or intimidation. Her fragility was no longer a label. It was a reminder of the strength that had been hidden beneath the surface all along. And so, as the stars stretched endlessly around them, the princess prepared for the challenges to come. She knew that she would face opposition, difficult decisions, and moments of doubt. But she also knew that she was capable of rising to meet them. The fragile princess was no longer just a prize. She was becoming a leader in her own right, ready to influence the galaxy through intelligence, empathy, and courage. The journey was only beginning, but already the universe was beginning to see the power hidden in the delicate figure who had once seemed so fragile. The princess had awakened, and with Kale by her side, she was ready to step into a role that would shape the destiny of many worlds. The galaxy had begun to recognize the princess for more than her delicate appearance. Her intelligence, diplomacy, and courage had earned her trust and respect, but now the true test of her abilities was approaching. Kale and the princess were called to assist in a distant sector that had been plagued by unrest. Several planets were at odds, with disputes over resources, trade, and governance threatening to spiral into conflict. This time, the challenge required more than negotiation. It demanded leadership, strategy, and the ability to unite diverse forces. As they approached the troubled sector, Kale turned to the princess. "This will be different from anything you've faced before," he said gently. "We'll need more than words. We'll need planning, coordination, and courage. But I have no doubt that you can handle it." The princess nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and responsibility. She understood that her skills were about to be tested in ways that could influence the fate of many worlds. She had grown from a fragile observer to someone ready to make real decisions, and now was her chance to prove herself further. The first challenge came on the planet of Turian, a world with rugged mountains and deep valleys, home to several factions who had been fighting over limited resources for generations. The princess studied the maps and reports carefully, learning about each faction's strengths, weaknesses, and motivations. She worked closely with Kale, devising a plan that focused on cooperation and shared benefits rather than dominance or intimidation. Her goal was to unite the factions under a common cause, turning potential conflict into collaboration. When they met the leaders of Turian, the princess spoke with calm authority. She proposed a cooperative project that would benefit all factions, a series of irrigation systems and trade routes that would increase resources, provide jobs, and improve living conditions across the planet. At first, the leaders were skeptical. They had been trained to distrust outsiders, and a young, delicate-looking princess did not inspire immediate confidence. But as she explained the plan in detail, answering every question with precision and clarity, their doubts began to fade. They could see that her ideas were practical, fair, and beneficial to everyone involved. Over the following days, the princess oversaw the implementation of the project. She coordinated teams from different factions, ensuring that each group contributed equally and respected one another. She solved disputes as they arose, using negotiation and logic rather than force. The factions began to work together, slowly building trust and understanding. The princess's leadership was quiet but effective. She did not demand obedience, she inspired cooperation. People began to see that her delicate appearance masked a sharp mind and a strong spirit, and her influence grew with every successful decision. Kale watched with pride. He had always known that she was intelligent, but seeing her apply her skills in real-world situations was extraordinary. She was no longer just a partner or a companion. She was a leader, capable of guiding people, resolving conflicts, and shaping outcomes. Her confidence had grown, and her presence commanded respect. Even the most stubborn leaders began to seek her advice, realizing that her insight could benefit their people. As their mission continued, the princess faced increasingly complex challenges. On the planet of Solara, she was tasked with coordinating a coalition of forces to protect trade routes from natural hazards and potential disputes. She analyzed data, identified risks, and developed contingency plans that ensured the safety of the fleet and the success of their mission. Her ability to anticipate problems and devise solutions impressed everyone involved. Even Kale, who had faced countless challenges, was amazed at her strategic thinking and calm decisiveness. The princess also began to take a more active role in training and organizing teams. She developed programs that taught skills such as problem-solving, communication, and teamwork, helping groups of diverse individuals work together effectively. Her approach emphasized understanding and empathy, fostering cooperation instead of competition. People who had once doubted her began to admire her not only for her intelligence, but also for her ability to inspire loyalty and unity. One of the most significant tests of her leadership came when a sudden crisis threatened to derail their plans. A natural disaster struck a planet in the coalition, damaging infrastructure and causing panic among the inhabitants. The princess acted quickly, coordinating rescue efforts, allocating resources, and ensuring that everyone was safe. She remained calm under pressure, making decisions with clarity and precision. Her leadership during the crisis won the admiration of both the coalition members and the planet's inhabitants. They saw her not as a fragile princess, but as a capable and courageous leader who could be relied upon in times of need. As the princess continued to lead, her reputation spread across the galaxy. News of her achievements reached distant worlds, and more leaders sought her guidance. She became a symbol of hope and intelligence, demonstrating that leadership was not about physical strength or fear, but about insight, empathy, and vision. People began to trust her judgment, knowing that she would act in the best interests of all, rather than for personal gain or power. Throughout these challenges, Kale remained by her side, offering support and advice when needed. Their relationship evolved into a partnership based on mutual respect and trust. Kale admired her courage, wisdom, and growing influence, while the princess valued his guidance, experience, and unwavering belief in her abilities. Together, they formed a team that combined human resourcefulness with her strategic brilliance, capable of tackling even the most complex problems in the galaxy. The princess also discovered her ability to inspire others on a personal level. She took time to speak with individuals, understand their concerns, and offer encouragement. Her empathy and insight allowed her to connect with people from different cultures, species, and backgrounds. She learned that leadership was not just about making decisions. It was about understanding people, earning their trust, and helping them realize their own potential. During one particularly important mission, the princess was asked to lead a coalition fleet to defend a vulnerable sector from a potential threat. She planned the operation carefully, coordinating ships, resources, and personnel from multiple planets. Her strategy emphasized cooperation, communication, and efficiency, ensuring that every member of the fleet understood their role and the overall objective. The operation was a success, and the coalition members praised her leadership, recognizing her as a skilled and capable commander. As the weeks and months passed, the princess continued to grow in confidence and ability. She faced challenges that tested her intellect, judgment, and courage, and she emerged stronger from each experience. Her reputation as a leader who could unite diverse forces, solve complex problems, and inspire loyalty continued to spread. People across the galaxy began to see that her delicate appearance was no indication of weakness. Instead, it masked a mind capable of brilliance and a spirit capable of remarkable courage. The princess reflected on her journey as she traveled with Kale through the stars. She remembered the days when she had been confined to her palace, protected and guided at every step. Now she had become a leader in her own right, able to influence decisions, guide people, and shape outcomes across the galaxy. She realized that fragility had never been a limitation. It had been a surface trait hiding her true strength. Her intelligence, empathy, and courage had become her greatest assets, allowing her to achieve more than she had ever imagined. As they prepared for their next mission, the princess felt a sense of purpose and determination. She knew that the challenges ahead would be greater, involving not only leadership and strategy, but also the responsibility of guiding entire fleets and influencing the destinies of multiple planets. Yet she no longer felt fear or doubt. She had discovered that her mind and spirit were stronger than anyone had expected, and she was ready to step fully into her role as a leader across the galaxy. The galaxy itself seemed to respond to her presence. Allies trusted her guidance, individuals sought her advice, and even distant leaders acknowledged her growing influence. She had become a symbol of hope, intelligence, and courage, showing that true strength was not measured by physical power alone, but by insight, empathy, and vision. The fragile princess had become a figure whose actions could shape the course of history. Throughout these experiences, Kale remained a steadfast companion and mentor. He continued to provide guidance, support, and encouragement, but he also recognized that the princess had grown into a leader capable of making her own decisions. Their partnership was one of mutual respect, trust, and shared purpose. Together, they demonstrated that collaboration, intelligence, and courage could achieve what force alone could never accomplish. As Part 4 of their journey came to a close, the princess stood at the helm of a coalition fleet, gazing out at the stars. She reflected on how far she had come, from a fragile, sheltered figure to a leader commanding respect across the galaxy. She knew that challenges would continue and that the responsibilities of leadership were immense, but she was ready. Her journey of growth, discovery, and courage had prepared her for the tasks ahead. The princess's story was no longer about fragility or limitation. It was about the power of intelligence, empathy, and vision. It was about the ability to inspire, unite, and guide others toward a better future. The galaxy had begun to see her true potential, and she was ready to embrace it fully, knowing that her journey was far from over, but that she was capable of shaping the destiny of countless worlds with wisdom and courage. The princess had come a long way from the fragile figure she had once been. The galaxy now recognized her for her wisdom, courage, and ability to unite people across worlds. She had traveled through countless star systems, resolved disputes, and led fleets with precision and empathy. The lessons she had learned from Kale and her own experiences had transformed her into a leader capable of influencing entire civilizations. Yet, even with her accomplishments, she felt that her journey was only beginning. The challenges ahead were greater than anything she had faced, and she was ready to embrace them fully. The first task of her latest mission involved uniting a coalition of planets that had long been in conflict. These planets had different cultures, languages, and traditions, and years of tension had created mistrust among them. The princess knew that brute force would achieve nothing. What was required was understanding, patience, and careful strategy. She studied reports, maps, and historical records, looking for patterns and opportunities for cooperation. Kale supported her every step, but she increasingly made decisions on her own, confident in her judgment. When she met with the leaders of the coalition, she spoke calmly and clearly, explaining her vision for a unified network of planets. She proposed systems of trade, communication, and shared resources that would benefit everyone while addressing past grievances. At first, some leaders were skeptical, seeing her youth and delicate appearance as a limitation. But as she answered their questions and presented evidence of the benefits, their skepticism began to fade. Slowly, they began to listen, realizing that her insights were practical and fair. Over the next weeks, the princess worked tirelessly to implement her plans. She coordinated teams of advisors, engineers, and diplomats from various planets, ensuring that everyone's voice was heard and their needs respected. Conflicts arose, of course, but she managed them with patience and clarity, resolving disputes through dialogue and compromise rather than confrontation. Her ability to unite diverse groups impressed everyone involved. The coalition began to function smoothly, with planets cooperating on trade, defense, and technology. The fragile princess had become a symbol of unity, intelligence, and hope. Her reputation spread far beyond the coalition. News of her successes reached distant star systems, and more leaders sought her guidance. She was invited to councils, assemblies, and diplomatic meetings across the galaxy. People admired her ability to balance strategy with empathy, intelligence with patience. Even those who had once doubted her abilities now recognized her as a leader who could bring positive change. Kale watched with quiet pride as she moved confidently among leaders, offering guidance, resolving disputes, and shaping decisions that affected millions. The princess also began to focus on education and training, understanding that true leadership involved nurturing the next generation of thinkers, diplomats, and problem solvers. She established academies where young leaders from different planets could learn negotiation, strategy, and cooperation. She encouraged creativity, critical thinking, and empathy, teaching that strength was not measured by physical power alone, but by the ability to understand, inspire, and unite others. These academies became renowned across the galaxy, producing skilled leaders who carried forward her vision of cooperation and peace. Her influence extended even further when a new challenge arose. A previously isolated system had experienced internal turmoil, with disputes threatening the stability of multiple planets. The princess was asked to intervene, not as a conqueror, but as a mediator and guide. She studied the system carefully, understanding the history, culture, and politics of each planet. Then she developed a plan that emphasized collaboration and mutual benefit. When she arrived, the leaders were hesitant. They had experienced outsiders imposing solutions that failed or caused more conflict. But the princess approached with humility and respect, listening to each leader and acknowledging their concerns. She offered ideas and solutions, demonstrating through logic and empathy how cooperation could improve life for everyone. Slowly, they began to trust her, and the system stabilized under her guidance. The princess had once again turned a delicate situation into a success, proving that leadership required wisdom, patience, and courage. Her partnership with Kale had also evolved. They were no longer simply protector and prize. They had become collaborators, thinkers, and friends who respected each other's abilities. Kale's experience and her intelligence complemented one another perfectly. They often discussed strategies, shared ideas, and planned missions together, creating a dynamic team capable of handling challenges that would overwhelm most others. Their bond was quiet but strong, built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. As the princess continued to lead, she began to focus on larger projects that could impact the galaxy as a whole. She helped organize alliances that promoted trade, cultural exchange, and technological advancement. She negotiated agreements that prevented conflicts before they started, using diplomacy, insight, and careful planning. She worked to ensure that planets with fewer resources were not left behind, advocating for fairness and cooperation. Her vision was not limited to individual missions or conflicts. It encompassed the idea of a connected galaxy where collaboration and understanding could bring lasting peace and progress. Even with her growing influence, the princess remained humble and grounded. She took time to speak with ordinary people, learning their needs and concerns. She encouraged participation, listened carefully, and offered guidance that was practical and respectful. People admired her for her kindness, patience, and wisdom. They trusted her not only as a leader, but as someone who genuinely cared for the well-being of all. Her delicate appearance was no longer a distraction. It had become a symbol of the unexpected power of intelligence, courage, and empathy. During one critical mission, the princess was asked to lead a coalition fleet to respond to a natural disaster affecting several planets. She coordinated rescue efforts, resource distribution, and rebuilding projects, ensuring that every planet received help efficiently and fairly. Her leadership was calm, organized, and effective. People began to see her not only as a mediator or strategist, but as someone who could handle real-world crises with skill and compassion. The fragile princess had become a leader capable of shaping the destiny of entire regions of the galaxy. The princess also recognized the importance of mentorship. She worked closely with emerging leaders, sharing her knowledge, teaching strategy, and encouraging them to think critically. She emphasized the values that had guided her own journey: empathy, understanding, patience, and courage. Through her mentorship, she created a new generation of leaders who could carry forward her vision of unity and cooperation across the stars. As the galaxy continued to face challenges, from political disputes to natural crises, the princess remained at the forefront, offering guidance, strategy, and inspiration. She had proven herself time and again, turning fragile beginnings into enduring successes. Kale often reminded her of the early days, when she had seemed delicate and inexperienced, and she would smile, knowing how far she had come. Her final transformation was not just in the way others saw her, but in the way she saw herself. She had moved from a fragile princess, uncertain and sheltered, to a confident leader guiding fleets, uniting planets, and shaping the future of the galaxy. She understood that strength was not measured by appearance or force, but by insight, empathy, and the courage to act wisely. Her journey had been long and challenging, but it had prepared her to lead with clarity and purpose. In the quiet moments between missions, she would look out at the stars, reflecting on her journey. She thought of her home planet, the palace she had left behind, and the life she had once known. She remembered her first meetings with Kale, the journey through strange systems, and the countless challenges that had tested her mind and spirit. Each experience had shaped her, teaching lessons of patience, understanding, and leadership. Now, as she traveled across the galaxy, the princess knew that she had become someone capable of influencing events on a massive scale. She had united factions, resolved conflicts, and inspired trust among countless worlds. She had proven that intelligence, empathy, and courage could achieve what brute force alone never could. The fragile princess had awakened, becoming a symbol of hope, wisdom, and strength for the entire galaxy. Her story was no longer just her own. It belonged to the people she had helped, the leaders she had guided, and the generations of young leaders she had inspired. Across countless star systems, people spoke of the princess who had started as fragile and untested, yet had grown to lead fleets, mediate disputes, and shape the destiny of worlds. She had shown that true strength came from within, from the mind, heart, and courage to act for the greater good. As she stood alongside Kale on the observation deck of their ship, gazing at the endless stars, the princess felt a sense of fulfillment and purpose. She had proven that beginnings did not define destiny, and that even the most fragile-seeming person could achieve greatness through determination, wisdom, and empathy. Together, they continued their journey, ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store, confident that they could meet every challenge with intelligence, courage, and heart. The universe had once doubted her. It had seen only fragility, delicacy, and inexperience. But the princess had transformed that perception, showing the galaxy that true power was not in appearance, but in the ability to think, understand, and inspire. Her name became known across star systems, not as a fragile figure, but as a leader whose vision and courage could shape the future. And so the princess continued her journey, leading fleets, uniting planets, and inspiring countless people to work together for a brighter, more cooperative galaxy. Her story was one of transformation, growth, and the realization that true strength comes from intelligence, empathy, and courage. The fragile princess had become a legend, not through force, but through the power of her mind and heart, leaving a legacy that would influence generations to come.